Welcome to David's Ships. In this video I continue with the construction of the 1 in 350 scale Schwerer Gustav kit. To watch other videos in this build series, follow the link to the playlist in the cards above. Today I build a very simple base for the model and prepare it for painting. The base for this model will be a piece of wood 44mm wide and roughly 170mm long. The length is dictated by the length of the tracks that come with the model. To make this base blend in with the bases for the other models that I have in my display cabinet, I'm going to paint it in black. This will also provide the base for the color that's going to go on the top. For the top, I'm going to try and give it a very subtle gravel effect. So I'll be using a series of grays that I will then sponge onto that surface. For this effect, I'm using a variety of grays. XF12, XF24 and XF54. I'm not overly concerned about which type of grey that I'm going to be using. I just want it to look something like gravel. So I want it to have a slight textured effect to it and be a fairly light grey. Since I have never done anything like this before, I have no clue what I'm doing. So this is very much a trial and error process. My thinking was to start with the darker colors first and then layer on lighter colors on top of them. My first attempt was this rather light sponging, and it became apparent very quickly that this wasn't going to work. The entire effect was going to be too dark and there was too much black showing through from underneath. Upon realizing that, I changed tactics and went to the lightest color first and then put down a lot of it to completely cover the base with the lightest of the grays. After giving the rather thick layer of very light grey a chance to dry, I loaded up the sponge with a darker grey and then dabbed it on the light grey to add in a few speckles. After completing the colour for the surface onto which the model will be mounted, I then proceeded to touch up the sides with more black paint. With that, the base was then ready for the installation of the photo etch tracks. To install the tracks, I placed them on the model dry and lined them up. And then I used the superglue applicator and extra thin superglue to bond the track to the base. I don't need it to be bonded absolutely everywhere, it just needs to be tacked down at a few points. So randomly throughout the tracks I apply the extra thin superglue to the planks. One of the trickiest things when handling this model has been to position the gun onto the 4 carriers, because the carriers need to be very precisely positioned for the whole gun structure to actually sit onto it properly. Because of this, and because they were independently articulated, it has been very difficult to get that right. So now I do it for the very last time. I place the carriers on the track, and then the gun on the carriers, and then carefully align the carriers to the tracks. Once the carriers are aligned correctly to the tracks, I then apply extra thin superglue to the wheels to bond the carriers to the tracks first. The idea is that once the carriers are bonded to the tracks, I'll be able to remove the gun and then access the carriers from the inside, where I can apply additional extra thin superglue to reinforce the bond. In effect, by the end of this process, I'll have the model in 2 parts, the base with the carriers and then the gun itself. After applying the initial superglue to the carriers, I lift the gun off of the carriers and then apply the extra thin superglue to the inner wheels. On the inner wheels I can be more generous with the glue because they're not going to be visible. These wheels will be hidden by the gun structure itself, so if there's a bit of detail hidden by this glue it doesn't matter because these wheels won't be seen anyway. After a few test fits and a bit of back and forward to open up the holes in the base of this gun structure, I'm able to get the gun onto and off of these carriages with ease. At this point this model is technically complete, but I am going to spray it in a gloss coat for 2 reasons. Firstly, I bought a detail upgrade kit. Well, technically it's a decal upgrade kit, since this model doesn't come with any decals, and I bought a very small sheet that contains a lot of very, very tiny decals. To apply decals to a kit, you need to apply them to a gloss surface, otherwise little air bubbles get trapped underneath the decals and you get a silvering effect. So, because I'm applying decals, I need to spray at least the locations where I'm going to be installing the decals in a gloss coat. The second reason why I'm going onto a gloss coat and I'm applying it over the entirety of the model is that I'm going to apply a panel line. Panel line works best when you apply it to a gloss surface. The gloss paint helps the panel line to run towards the details and also makes it a lot easier to clean up. Furthermore, the gloss coat will protect underlying layers of paint. although in this case that's not strictly necessary since all the paint that I've used so far is acrylic, and I will be using an enamel based panel liner, which means that it is removed with a turpentine based solvent, and turpentine solvent will not harm acrylic paint. There's a third reason to spray it in a gloss coat. Gloss coats do have a rather hard finish, which will help protect the underlying paint. I found that a matte varnish is easier to scratch than a gloss varnish, but in any case the last layer on this model will be a matte varnish, so I'm going to have to deal with that risk of scratching the paint anyway. The gloss varnish that I'm using is Tamiya X22, and I spray the model until there is a clear shine across the entire model. One of the reasons that I did not attach the gun to the base at this stage is because I want to be able to spray it from multiple angles. If this gun was attached to the base, I wouldn't be able to get in from all the angles, and it would make spraying this gloss coat a lot more difficult. It would also make the weathering process more difficult. So at least at this point, keeping it in two parts is going to work out to be the easier method. Now that the carriages are secured onto the base into a fixed position, it makes it a lot easier for me to place this gun platform onto the actual carriers. So going forward, I'm not going to have to worry about trying to get all of that aligned again. That's done now. Now that the model is fully glossed up, we have reached the end of the video. In the next video, I install the decals, and after that there will be one more video in this build series, which will be the application of the panel line. If you would like to support this channel or see how this model looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.